Hello and welcome to a Friday, live right here on the morning after on Sports Grid and Sirius XM channel 159. That's the home for Sports Grid Radio on Sirius XM, all across the Spiz Grizz network. That's Sports Grid. I am Ben Stevens, live from our New Jersey headquarters here in Homedale, New Jersey, at Bellworks on this Football Friday on TMA. Preseason week number 2 in the National Football League got us underway last night in Seattle. A full recap of what happened between the Bears and the Seahawks, but also a Football Friday with big news out of the NFL as it pertains to the Deshaun Watson decision. The NFL and the NFLPA have reached a settlement for Deshaun Watson's suspension for the 2022 NFL season. That final number is 11 games. Deshaun Watson will miss the first 11 games for the Cleveland Browns in 2022. The settlement also includes a fine of $5 million that will go to charity, and Deshaun Watson is required to undergo treatment while he is away from the Cleveland Browns. So, here's how we got to this point. Of course, Judge Sue L. Robinson made her ruling initially, the independent arbiter in this case. The NFL presented its report as to what they believed in terms of Deshaun Watson violating the NFL's personal conduct policy. Judge Sue L. Robinson agreed that the NFL met that burden of proof, but issued only a 6-game suspension for Watson. Of course, the NFL appeal just over 2 weeks ago. That appeal oversaw by Peter C. Harvey, Roger Goodell's designee for the appeals process, and a settlement was reached yesterday between the league office and the Players Association. Again, an 11-game suspension for Deshaun Watson in 2022. It is final. This is now done. Deshaun Watson will miss 11 games for this upcoming season. And Deshaun Watson, for the first time in a very long time, speaking to the media after Cleveland Browns practice yesterday, telling a group of reporters he will, quote, continue to stand on his innocence, said he never assaulted or disrespected anyone. A complete change from what Deshaun Watson said only on Friday night ahead of the Browns' preseason opener, in which Deshaun played and went 1 of 5 for only 7 yards against the Jacksonville Jaguars. In a team-orchestrated softball interview, Deshaun Watson, for the first time, admitted any wrongdoing and apologized for the harm that he had caused to the women in this situation. That was a complete role reversal from what Deshaun Watson said after practice yesterday. And again, it's 11 games. We know that the NFL was seeking a full year-long suspension of Deshaun Watson. They settle at 11 games. We'll get to why that number is very interesting here in just a bit. This is much more than just a football story, but from that odds perspective, we saw movement in the marketplace against the Cleveland Browns yesterday. They were the final team out of all 32 NFL organizations to have that win total posted earlier this summer in the offseason. When it opened up, it was 9.5 games. After the NFL's appeal, it moved to 8.5, and the under took on more and more juice. And after that 11-game settlement was reached yesterday for Deshaun's suspension for 2022, the under has even more juice. 8.5 is that win total for Cleveland in 2022, and the juice is heavily on the under at minus 160. The market also working against the Browns in the AFC North Division, plus 300 prior to the 11-game suspension, and the settlement agreed upon by the NFL and NFLPA, 70 cents of movement back at plus 370. We'll get to all the odds as it pertains to the Cleveland Browns moving forward in 2022 in just a moment. First, we welcome in our Sports Grid radio audience here, live on this Friday from New Jersey on the morning after. Sirius XM, channel 159. All of our terrestrial radio affiliates now in the mix as well. I am Ben Stevens. The NFL and the NFLPA yesterday reached a settlement for Deshaun Watson's suspension for 2022. That final number is 11 games. Watson will miss the first 11 games for the Cleveland Browns, is entitled to return November 28th ahead of week number 13 in the National Football League. We saw the market work against the Browns yesterday, as I mentioned. In the divisional market, Cleveland had the third best odds, but at a price of 3-1. They were the favorites earlier in this offseason before we got to all that we have here in the Deshaun Watson decision. 3-1 yesterday, plus 370 today. That win total is at 8.5. And here's the very interesting thing about how you correlate the odds throughout these markets. the win total on Cleveland has grown lesser and lesser, with the juice more on the under as the betting public, it seems, is fading the Cleveland Browns. But that's the only negative market where you can fade Cleveland, betting the under on their win total for 2022, because the make playoff odds is just a make playoff odd. There is no miss up right now, unlike the other 31 NFL teams across the league. And you can't make a bet on them to lose the division, because that would have heavy under on that juice. So Deshaun Watson is available to return for the Cleveland Browns in week number 13 of this 2022 NFL season. Week 13 for the Browns, their 12th game of the year on the road against the Houston Texans. That is Deshaun Watson's first game he is available to return. And 11 games is very interesting. Not 10, not 12, because to constitute a full year in the National Football League, you need to be available to play for 6 games. And all of this ties into the financial nature of Deshaun Watson's 5-year, $230 million fully guaranteed contract. Because if he is available to play for 6 games, that is a full year in 2022, and his salary for next year in 2023 cannot be docked by the Cleveland Browns. All of it a little bit shady in how they orchestrated that deal. Plenty more around the National Football League. Preseason Week 2 previews up next here on The Grid.
Sports Grid, your 24/7 sports wagering network.
They play less games.
The early line.
Take a look at the top 4 seeds here in the Big Ten. They're going to play less.
Aaron Rodgers and
the morning
Russell
after.
Wilson. We saw movement in the marketplace like
Orlando
Fantasy
Magic.
Sports
the
today.
Cleveland Cavaliers are a little thin as well.
Newswire.
Minus 160 favorite on the money line today for Arizona.
Pharrell coast to coast.
That's where they win cups. They win Stanley Cups over there. Give me the
Game
Penguins.
time decisions.
Bizarre when you consider everybody is out for the Warriors.
In-game live all access.
I like Vandy against Bama. I think Vandy could win the game, take it 4.5.
In-game live, prime time.
The PGA champion.
In-game live, overtime.
All done before the final bet.
Get the winning edge. Only on Sports Grid. The early line.
And I'm going to say this until I'm blue in the face. Let me help you, NCAA. Put me in control. We will wipe the bowl season out completely. We will put in a 30-team playoff at a minimum. We will wipe out the cupcake schedules, and everybody will eat at the end of the year. More money in your pockets, college football guys. More fun in my pocket here.
Only on Sports Grid. Fantasy Sports Today.
They went out and they signed DJ Shark, formerly of the Jacksonville Jaguars, to a contract. And Shark was an afterthought in Jacksonville. And maybe it's predominantly because of the offense that they were running last year under Urban Meyer. But Shark basically was in and out of injuries. He had some hand issues, and he only caught 154 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns.
The Sports Grid Network.
Sports Professor Rick Horrow with your Daily Numbers Game and the ongoing saga of Soldier Field and the Chicago Bears. Well, way back when I was involved with the NFL on the stadium side, we all decided that a non-dome renovation of Soldier Field at the exact same place with historical tax credits would be the way to go. Some said move it closer to the McCormick Place, put a dome on it, Final Fours, NCAAs, Super Bowls. Well, that didn't happen. Now, Bears buy property, Arlington Heights, wanting to do a joint venture there, well in time for their lease to expire. The city says, not so fast, and the controversy ensues. The side controversy, the turf. Elton John plays a concert there 8 days later, the Chiefs and the Bears. Now the Fire moved their game. The Players Association says, this is unacceptable for us to play. It looks like playing on dirt. It's just one of those little skirmishes and battles until a team gets a long-term stadium deal. Look for more of it.
NFL preseason week number 2 started last night. We have 3 more games on this Friday, 8 on Saturday, 3 on Sunday, and even Monday night football. Preseason football is football too. But the biggest news out of the NFL yesterday, it has been settled, it is finalized, it is agreed upon by both the National Football League and the NFLPA. Deshaun Watson is suspended for 11 games for the 2022 NFL season. Fined $5 million as well. And after Browns practice yesterday, we got reaction from Deshaun Watson himself, the owners Jimmy and Dee Haslam, GM Andrew Berry, and head coach Kevin Stefanski asked about Deshaun Watson's availability, the rest of training camp, and this preseason, and when we will see Deshaun Watson return for week number 13 of the NFL campaign. He is available to come back for the Browns November 28th. So Kevin Stefanski saying yesterday, Deshaun Watson will not play any longer for Cleveland throughout the rest of this preseason. He got the start last week in the Browns opener, just 1 of 5 for 7 yards against the Jaguars. He can practice, Deshaun Watson that is, until August 30th, be back on the practice field in November, and again, is set to play and make his return to the NFL week number 13 of this season, the 12th game for the Browns on the road in Houston against his former team, the Texans. Now, Deshaun Watson will not play in week number 2 of the preseason for the Browns. They are the first of those 3 games that we will see on Sunday afternoon, taking on the Philadelphia Eagles at home in Cleveland. The Birds, a 3-point favorite as of right now. That total you can see on your screen, an over-under of 35.5 is the lowest number by a good margin for any of the week 2 preseason games. It is now Jacoby Brissett's team. He will get to work with the ones. He will start at that quarterback position and presumably will be the day 1 starter for Cleveland on the road in their regular season opener against the Carolina Panthers and former quarterback Baker Mayfield. The headlines, the schedule makers in the National Football League always have a way of putting interesting games together, to say the least. Preseason week number 2 began last night in the Pacific Northwest. The Seahawks at home, a 3.5-point favorite hosting the Chicago Bears. And Chicago goes on the road and says, enough of that spread. We're winning outright on the money line. The Bears hammering the Seahawks last night in Seattle, 27-11. Chicago winning outright as that 3.5-point dog, and 27-11. That's 38 total points, staying under the total of 39.5. And from that preseason total perspective, 14 of the first 17 games went over. We knew the strong over trends in the preseason. Yesterday stays under. Just the 4th under out of 18 total preseason games, week 1, week 2, and the Hall of Fame game as well. We saw tons of fluctuation in that over-under yesterday. It opened around 39.5, got up to 41 in a hook yesterday in the morning time hours as well, and then closed around 39 in a hook. Quarterback questions for both teams, Chicago and Seattle, entering 2022. Justin Fields, my guy, who you know that I love, entering year number 2 as the quarterback for the Chicago Bears. And as we saw yesterday, Justin Fields is going to be under unrelenting pressure because his offensive line is in shambles. But only 1 possession for the second-year quarterback, interestingly enough, for the Bears yesterday. 5 of 7 through the air, 39 yards, and did lead the Bears to an opening field goal on his only possession of the game. Geno Smith on the other side for Seattle. No Drew Lock, testing positive for COVID-19, missing last night's game against the Bears. Geno Smith plays the entirety of that first half, making his 2nd straight start for the Seahawks in this preseason. 10 of 18, 112 yards, no touchdown passes. He has not thrown a touchdown in either of the 2 preseason games for the Seahawks. Did it provide any more clarity for Seattle, who will be their day 1 starter in the regular season at that quarterback spot last night? I don't necessarily think so. We heard from Michaela Mattis yesterday, who covers the Seahawks up there in Seattle, saying she believes Geno Smith will start week number 1. I don't think he did anything necessarily last night to deserve or earn or win that starting quarterback spot. We'll see what Drew Lock has in store for week number 3, where I think Pete Carroll and the rest of the Seahawks staff will make their final determination. So 3 more preseason games tonight. But first, we look at Chicago and Seattle from an overall regular season perspective. Both the Bears and the Seahawks have a very low win total for this upcoming year at 5.5. As you can see there, both teams have heavy juice on that over. Chicago even more than Seattle, minus 145 for the Bears, minus 135 to that over of 5.5 wins for the Seahawks. And again, Seattle has gone over this number of 5.5 wins in 12 consecutive years. The Bears have gone over in 3 of the last 4, but both are tied for the third shortest odds, if that's how you want to think of it, to have the worst regular season record in the National Football League. Plus 750 for both Seattle and Chicago in that market. The favorites are the Houston Texans, who have a win total at 4.5, even juice on both sides. The Falcons, the second shortest price. The Falcons also a win total of 4 and a hook, but more juice on the over. All right, preseason week number 2, fully underway on this Friday evening. Friday night lights across the National Football League, including in Foxborough for a second straight week. And when I tell you we have seen market movement in favor of the Patriots, boy, do I mean it. That is a 3.5-point spread, as I can see on my screen, and hopefully you are seeing the same at home. My eyesight's not all that great in the studio, but now live on the FanDuel Sportsbook, New England is a 5-point favorite. When I checked earlier this morning, just about half an hour ago, it had worked its way up to 4. Now it's at 5 in favor of the Patriots, potentially because of the return of the Mac, as we have there on that headline for our game board between the Patriots and the Panthers tonight. Mac Jones and most of the starters for New England, at least as cagey as Bill Belichick can be, assumed to start tonight and play a decent amount for New England. The Pats lost last week on a last-second field goal against the New York Giants in their preseason debut, also in Foxborough. But last preseason, the Patriots a perfect 3-0. Maybe a quarterback battle on the other side in Carolina, or at least some QB intrigue. Baker Mayfield got the start last week, only 1 possession, 4 of 7 for 45 yards in the Panthers' 23-21 win over the Commanders. Sam Darnold got 2 drives, was just 2 of 3 for 16 yards, but did throw a touchdown. That will be a focal point tonight, the quarterback position. The second-year QB for New England in Mac Jones, and the battle between Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold for Carolina. All 4 QBs for the Panthers played last week, including P.J. Walker and the rookie out of Ole Miss, Matt Corral. We also have a matchup tonight in New Orleans between the Saints and the Packers that we'll detail in full in hour number 2 with Aaron Summers, a team reporter for the New Orleans Saints. But the third and final game is at SoFi Stadium, the home of the Super Bowl champion Los Angeles Rams. The Rams and the Texans to round out our Friday night schedule of preseason football. By the way, the game's at Lambeau between the Saints and the Packers. My mistake there. Anyway, this game is in Los Angeles between the Rams and the Texans. And right now, LA booked as a 2.5-point underdog at home tonight with a total at 38. Again, those totals for week 2 on the rise slightly from where they were in week number 1, given the fact that we expect to see the starters and more influential players get a little bit more run in this second week. And we saw so many overs last week, the books have to adjust. I will say this about LA. Houston got a win in week number 1 as well. We know Sean McVay's thoughts on the preseason. He doesn't play a lot of the starters, if any of the starters, for his Rams roster. But last week, Bryce Perkins, in his second year in the NFL out of Virginia, was sensational at the quarterback spot. He was the only QB that played for LA, 10 of 17, 133 yards through the air, 2 passing scores, also added 39 yards on the ground and a rushing touchdown as well. The Rams won against the Chargers last week, 29-22. Maybe the Rams have something with Bryce Perkins here in this preseason, and we look to the Rams as the underdogs getting 2.5 points at home tonight against the Houston Texans. All right, Major League Baseball time. The hunt for October, a postseason push in the bigs. That's up next.
Your heart's racing. The clock's running out. It all comes down to this. We're talking pregame. 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 Get locked in with Game Time Decisions. Your hosts, Gabe Morency and Cam Stewart, will get you ready for game time. Everything you need to know before a game goes off the board, with the bet slips to back it up. Make your best bet with live odds updates, late breaking news, up-to-the-minute injury reports, and real-time analytics from inside the sportsbooks. All the odds, all the action, from sports wagering insiders and industry pros like Donnie Rightside, Cam Lou, Cousin Sal, the Pro Football Doc, Dr. David Chow, and more. Get the winning edge every weekday afternoon from 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern, 3 to 4 Pacific. It's Game Time Decisions. Only on Sports Grid.
You might be the next daily fantasy millionaire. No matter what you watch or where you play, learn from the world's best DFS players. Lineup building tools, expert projections, and advanced stats change the way you play the game. Dominate the competition. DailyRoto.com, the player's choice.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
How relevant is season-long fantasy now? Like, do you hear people talking about season-long fantasy, or is it just because we're in Vegas, we're in the bubble, and we never hear about it?
It's mentioned, but it used to be the thing.
Right.
It's not the thing anymore. And for you guys that are in fantasy and stuff, it's just a reality. Again, it's not personal. It's not as important as it was. I loved it.
The Bostonian versus the Book. Pharrell, coast to coast.
Racking up numbers. We're going with the home run props for both the Jays and the Yankees tonight. So why not get them both to score a ton of runs, Scotty? Yankees and the Jays, both to score 4 or more runs tonight at plus 210. Maybe the Yankee bats are awake after the Donaldson walk-off grand slam last night.
I think so. Barrios, 5.6. Montas gives up 3.5, 4 runs a game.
The Sports Grid Network. Fantasy Sports Today.
To show you how thin tight end is, TJ Hawkinson with these numbers, 583 is the 7th overall tight end being drafted.
He's going to be with Dalton Schultz. All right, Dalton Schultz, Hawkinson, Goddard. Might put Zach Ertz in this tier as well. He was really good when he came over to Arizona last year. He's in that tier. But still, he's a good, solid tight end. If you don't want to spend a second, third round pick on the guys I just mentioned, the top tier.
The Sports Grid Network.
A 40-game regular season sprint, if you will, left in Major League Baseball. From the 162 of the daily grind, the hunt for October is certainly on all across the major leagues. And we break it all down in MLB right here, right now, on a Friday on the morning after on Sports Grid. Mark Zinno joins the show right now. Our utility player, as his high school baseball coach said, Zinno, you can do a lot, but none of them all that well. I think you do everything all that well, and especially your Major League Baseball insight, where you are in Atlanta, which was the focus of the Bigs for a lot of this last week. Zinno, as always, thank you for joining us here on a Friday on TMA.
It's great to be here. You can join the lonely island that my mother sits on as the people who think that I do anything well. So enjoy the company. She's at least a good cook.
I am very happy to be in that very strong company. And, Zinno, as we talk about the Braves and the Mets, a battle for the top spot in the National League East. The Mets entered this series in Atlanta with a 5.5-game lead in the division. After the Braves take 3 of 4, including the finale yesterday, a victory 3-2 over Jacob deGrom and the Mets, that divisional lead for New York is now just 3.5 games. How significant was this series in Atlanta this week between the Braves and the Amazons?
It was the only thing that kept them alive, theoretically, in winning the division. And you can put the loss last night squarely, in my opinion, on Buck Showalter's shoulders. If you follow me on Twitter, at Mark Zinno, I tweeted out as soon as he pulled deGrom, I said, this is a ballsy move, pulling your starter against the Braves' most dangerous hitter at that point in Michael Harris. Oh, by the way, if you didn't know, Michael Harris was 0 for 2 with 2 strikeouts against DeGrom, and you pulled him for Seth Lugo, at which point he promptly hits a double in the gap and scores the go-ahead run. I mean, look, that's the spot where your best pitcher, who is Jacob DeGrom, should have the ball in his hands. I just thought it was way open to second guessing. I would have rather lost and made him beat DeGrom than anybody else on that team other than Edwin Diaz, and you weren't bringing Edwin Diaz in the top of the 7th inning. So from that standpoint, you know, I think Buck Showalter did the Braves a little bit of a favor and gave him a gift. Now, that said, 6 games, Ben, is sort of the line of demarcation you have to be within for the last two and a half weeks of the season to make up, in my opinion. If you can play 666 baseball the last 2 weeks, let's call it 12 games, 13 games, 8-4, 9-4, and you get the team that you're ahead of, the team that's in front of you to play, 400 baseball, which is basically going like 5-9 in that stretch, or 5-8, you're going to overtake them. So you got to be within 6 games. And the fact that the Braves now have this down to 3.5 is incredible, given that they were still a 10.5 behind on Memorial Day weekend. They ballooned back up to 7.5 at one point earlier this month, and they are right now where they need to be. And they really showed the Mets that they can hang with them. Like, the Mets might have had a mental edge after taking 4-5 at Citi Field, but the Braves sort of took it right back and reminded them who the defending champs are.
Yeah, the Mets 4-5 in Queens just last weekend, but then in Atlanta, the Braves take 3 of 4. It's the first series loss for the Mets this year against any divisional opponent. A 3.5 game lead for New York, still minus 440 as those strong divisional favorites in the National League East, but Atlanta, the second best price, as you can see right there, plus 350, and the Braves inching closer to that top spot in the National League East. What I will say is when the Mets entered last night with a 4.5 game lead in the division and Jacob DeGrom on the bump, they were a minus 850 favorite to win the NL East. I think your point, Zinno, is valid about what Buck Showalter decided to do in the bottom of the 7th inning. Jacob DeGrom had already pitched 6 2/3, was at 95 pitches trying to close out that 7th inning and was unable to do so. Buck Showalter goes to the bullpen. It ends up resulting in a 3rd earned run on Jacob DeGrom's card. He gets the loss, and Max Fried gets the win in a great pitcher's duel last night in Atlanta. So that's where things stand right now in the National League East. The Mets losing yesterday. Both New York teams lost yesterday. But the Yankees back up in the Bronx, a divisional series against the Toronto Blue Jays starting yesterday, and their pitcher, Frankie Montas, acquired at the trade deadline, has not looked very good in pinstripes. His first start at Yankee Stadium yesterday, Zinno, in front of the home crowd, and the Blue Jays welcome him to New York with a 9-2 victory. Jumping on Montas early, 5 runs in the top of the 2nd, and now Frankie Montas, in 3 starts for the Yanks, 14 earned runs combined in 3 starts, and the Yankees now have only won 3 games in their last 15 tries.
It's bad. Ben, let's put this in perspective. If you go towards the middle of June, they were on pace to win 120 games this year.
Yep.
Before the All-Star break, they were on pace to win about 115 games. Even by the end of July, they were still on pace to win like 105 games. They're now not on pace to win 100 games. And they have a long way. They have to win, 27 games over the course of the next 5 weeks. So you're playing probably, 35 games. They've got to go like 27-8 the rest of the way out to win 100 games. Could you have imagined this team not winning 100 games when they had 61 wins at the All-Star break, or 68 wins, whatever it was? Like, it's insane how quickly they have fallen. Look, they've had injuries, okay? And they have hit some slumps with some guys across the board. I mean, save the Josh Donaldson grand slam from a guy who's batting my weight over the course of the last month, who hasn't hit water all season long. That Yankee moment that new Yankees have usually comes in, like, if it doesn't come in April, fans are booing the hell out of him. Then usually it comes in May and everybody forgives him. Yeah, it took August for Josh Donaldson to have his Yankee moment, by the way. So beyond all that, this is just a team that I thought in the beginning of the year had a bunch of holes in it. I think they've been exposed due to lack of depth and injuries. And I'll say it again, and people can roll their eyes at me, and I hope when you roll them, they hit in the back of your head hard, because Aaron Boone, I think, bears a lot of this. He's got to try something else. I know he's juggled the lineup around. Keep doing anything, because what you're putting out there each night is not working. And at the end of the day, they have holes in their starting staff. The bullpen is banged up and hurt. They don't have anybody in the lineup other than Judge right now that they can trust to put the bat on the ball on a routine basis. It's bad. They are headed for one of the worst collapses we may ever see in baseball history.
The Yankees at the All-Star break, 64-28. Since the Midsummer Classic, 9-18 straight up. They have lost 12 of their last 15. They have been booked as a favorite in 14 of those 15 games on this span. And at the All-Star breaks, the Pinstripes had the highest updated win total in all of MLB at 105 in a hook, and it seemed they were going to fly past even that lofty number. Maybe not so much anymore for New York. And as you saw there, now 3.5 games behind the Houston Astros, who demolished the White Sox yesterday, by the way, 21-5 for that top spot in the American League. And the Astros now, as of this week, the favorites to win the AL pennant. So the Blue Jays take the opening game against the Yankees in the Bronx. The Rays beat the Yankees in the Bronx in a week series earlier this week, and the Rays are at home today now against the Kansas City Royals. Zinno, the Blue Jays and the Rays have the same record at this moment, tied for the second spot in those final two wild card positions in the American League race. It's Shane McClanahan on the bump today for Tampa. They are booked as an over $2 home favorite, but since the All-Star break, Shane McClanahan has looked a little bit worse for wear. Entered the break, as the favorite to win the American League Cy Young. That's not the case any longer. Can he do enough today to keep Tampa in that second spot in the wild card race?
Well, thankfully, he's playing a very soft-hitting team, the Kansas City Royals. I mean, this is a spot here with McClanahan that you're backing on him to be utterly dominant. I'd lay the 1.5. I know it's not a popular bet, and it's probably, the worst bet you can make in baseball. But against this Royals team right now, who've been bad on the road, been bad overall, if McClanahan's going to have a dominant outing, it's going to be against this team. Now, the Royals don't strike out a ton, but he's got to find a way to get outs for this team and continue to elevate them. And oh, by the way, how long are we going to do this exercise now with bookmakers and the Tampa Bay Rays win total every year? I mean, I booked it earlier in the year. 89.5 was their preseason win total. I took the over. I'm going to get there. I have a lot of confidence that I'm going to get there. And we keep undervaluing what this team does and what Kevin Cash and company are able to do year in and year out with basically a lot of names that not many people know. So Tampa Bay is kind of, as much as Toronto's offense scares me, Tampa Bay overall scares me when it comes to the AL East. I mean, both of these teams almost feel like right now they got the Yankees right where they want them, struggling. And unless the Yankees can turn it around, one of these two teams may actually overtake them. It's unfathomable to think, but it's possible at this point.
The Yankees still a 9-game lead in the American League East over the Blue Jays and the Rays. But Zinno, I have said often, the Rays were the number 1 overall seed in the American League postseason picture each of the last 2 years. It's never flashy for Tampa, but they just win baseball games. 63 wins so far this season. In the American League Central, Zinno, a very important weekend set in Cleveland between the Guardians, who currently occupy that top spot in the AL Central, and the White Sox trying to forget the last 2 days in Houston, losing yesterday 21-5, where the Stros, or at least those games were against Houston, those games actually in Chicago, the Astros had 25 hits. In the American League Central, a very, very important series. The Guardians, the slight home favorites today.
I mean, I hope the White Sox prove me right, because we were talking about this back in May. As soon as they became a plus money favorite or a plus money dog, rather, to win the AL Central, I told everybody, go take them. Take the White Sox now while they're plus money. Take them, because there is no way you're going to see better odds in this. So hopefully they make me look smart and come back and win this thing, which I think they will. They'll squeeze their way out of this and end up out on top when it's all said and done. But they got to beat the teams that they're supposed to beat, and they haven't done that as of late. So you can't be losing to the Tigers all that much.
Cleveland, the off day yesterday, still a 1-game lead over the Twins, 2.5 in front of Chicago. And as you saw in the odds, all 3 of those teams within 65 cents of each other. Mark Zinno, have a wonderful weekend. As always, we appreciate your many areas of talent here on The Morning After. More TMA up next.
Sports Grid your 24/7 sports wagering network.
People are going to the betting window
Betting
and
above
betting
the
them now
rim.
before the trade takes place.
How dare
Diamond
they do
bets.
what's fiscally responsible? See how it plays out. Buffalo's going all in right
Football
now. They need
full
to put
circle.
all their chips in the middle of the table. It's do or die for them.
And Godwin being out, they've had a little bit of a shakeup.
In-game live all access.
You could take the points, you could take the money line, and
We have to go to San Jose, too. Maybe a small fan of San Jose. I'm going to go both underdogs here. I don't want to hear it anymore.
Wow. In-game
Phillies
live.
here,
Prime
over minus
time.
128. We do have to lay a little bit of wood here, Donnie, but I think against Patrick Corbin.
But boy, you want to give me 8.5 points with a desperate team facing
Get
elimination.
the winning edge. Only on Sports Grid, your 24/7 sports wagering network. The morning after.
Chargers a playoff team in 2022.
Our concern, our chief concern right now, no pun intended, is that the Chargers have had a habit of blowing games late, and it continued with the new coaching regime. I do think they are one of the teams that I can pencil in. I wouldn't put them in pen, but I'd pencil them in.
The Sports Grid Network. The Bostonian versus the Book.
The next two Super Bowls for us are going to be ridiculous.
yeah,
Like, just ridiculous. So I cannot wait to see what's going to happen in Arizona.
really hope it's not the Patriots.
Oh, could you imagine that?
No.
Mac Jones in the Super Bowl in year 2? Oh, man.
Stop talking.
The Bostonian versus the Book. Pharrell coast to coast.
Is it that much better than the Phillies?
I mean, I would say that probably as a staff, as a whole, the Braves staff is probably not as good as 1 and 2 of Philly, but I think from 3 on down, I do think Atlanta's better. And remember, some of those starting pitchers that are not going to start for the Braves are going to be coming out of the bullpen in a series like that in the wild card. So,
The Sports Grid Network.
Finality, it appears, for Deshaun Watson's suspension for the 2022 NFL season, as we led off the show with a settlement reached between the NFL and NFLPA yesterday. Deshaun Watson will miss the first 11 games for the Cleveland Browns in 2022. Reaction live right here on the morning after on this Friday, all across Sports Grid. I am Ben Stevens, very pleased to welcome back onto the show right now. It is Mac Robinson covering the Browns with a wonderful podcast known as the Hurry Up Podcast for all things Browns entering 2022. Mac, thank you as always for joining us here on this Football Friday on the morning after.
Yeah, happy to be on with you, Ben. Just a crazy news cycle that finally seems like we can talk football at this point.
And we can look forward to what the Browns will have for the 2022 season. We'll do that in just a minute. But of course, the breaking news yesterday afternoon, Deshaun Watson will be suspended for the first 11 games for Cleveland in 2022. Fined $5 million as well. We'll need to seek counseling outside before he is able to return for Cleveland in late November and ahead of their Week 13 matchup on the road at the Houston Texans. So, Mac, we got all of this news yesterday. What was your initial reaction?
You know, I thought it was surprising that the odd number of games, at least to see it at first, because we had constantly heard, 8 games from Deshaun Watson's side. You heard 12 games from the NFL side of it. But at the same time, when you dive into it a little bit deeper, you understand why that 11 games is significant. mainly because of the fact that, the questions of will his season accrue when it comes to his contract going forward, or could the Browns make that argument if he plays less than 6 games, that this season, basically that contract extension starts next season. So for Deshaun Watson playing those 6 games, even if it's starting against the Houston Texans, that was a big win for him, especially to make sure that this season still does count. You're not worried about, the legalities of that in a grievance at that point. But, definitely a situation where, I looked at it and thought, honestly, it's not the full season. So, when it comes to the Browns team, I think that that's a win. But at the same time, I look at Deshaun Watson, and now, after hearing Kevin Stefanski yesterday saying that he's not going to play in the preseason, now at this point, I'm just kind of looking forward to seeing, how does he come back? How does he look when he gets back on the field? And, especially more than anything, because we've talked about, hypotheticals time and time and time again of, what's the suspension going to be? We've had this discussion in, I think, every possible way that you can over the last 5 months. So at this point now, to actually have an answer, it's almost a little bit of a sense of relief, at least when it comes to the Cleveland side of it.
There is the clarity from that football perspective now for Kevin Stefanski and the Browns and their path moving forward for the upcoming 2022 NFL season. And we saw the market move yesterday, Mac, as it pertains to the Browns win total that you see there on your screen. It is now 8.5. The under has heavy juice at -160. Did the 11-game suspension, Mac, for Deshaun Watson for this upcoming year change your record prediction at all for the Browns specifically entering this upcoming season?
I would say no. Out of anything, maybe slightly brought it back down a little bit. But, honestly, I think that there's a lot of faith in Berea when it comes to Jacoby Brissett. And, you look at that locker room and they have a lot of trust in the guy. And, for Jacoby Brissett, the way that I look at it with him is the fact that, the wide receivers, obviously, I know that they're unproven, but a pretty talented group nonetheless. And when you compare the supporting cast all around, I think that this is the most talented group that he's had in his career. So at this point, look at what happened last year. You had an injured Baker Mayfield, throughout the majority of the season, and you were still 8-9. And, you still had on Christmas Day, as terrible a performance as it was, Baker Mayfield had 4 interceptions, and they still almost beat Green Bay in Green Bay. Mm-hmm. So, at that point, it's Jacoby Brissett kind of managing his way and kind of making sure that he's steadying the ship. I don't necessarily think it's out of the question for the Browns to be, floating. I'll put it that way, kind of staying afloat when it comes to Jacoby Brissett. And at that point, if Deshaun Watson's able to come back, have that kind of pick-me-up game against the Houston Texans, again, the team that's not necessarily the most talented, and I'm being as kind as I possibly can when it comes to that roster. But, having that game lead into some more divisional matchups, I think that that's where it starts to get interesting with that back half of the year.
Listen, late November, early December is where we start to see those in the hunt graphics for teams contending for wild card positions in that playoff picture. If Jacoby Brissett can keep the Browns afloat, we might see that logo and the team name in those graphics, which leads into my next question, Mac. We know Deshaun Watson is available to return week number 13 of the NFL season. It is the 12th game of the year for the Browns, Sunday, December 4th on the road against the Houston Texans. You might be saying to yourself, it feels a little bit strange that the NFL would settle and allow Deshaun Watson's return to the National Football League be against his former team in the Texans. But as Mac laid out there, you need to play at least 6 games or be available to play in at least 6 games to accrue a full season by the contract perspective for a National Football League year. And that is why we got to the 11 games. So now back to that schedule, Mac, the final 6 games for the Cleveland Browns when Deshaun Watson is available to return at the quarterback spot. What record do you think the Browns will have entering week number 13?
So entering week 13, I have them at either 5-6 or 6-5. I think that that's pretty much what our fair expectations are for Jacoby Brissett. And especially, you have that offensive line back. I understand Nick Harris has already gone down for the season. But at the same time, you still have two all-pro talents at guard when it comes to Joel Bitonio and Wyatt Teller. You still have Jack Conklin. He's coming back from injury. And then also Jedrick Wills, who, yes, he had a disappointing year too, but at the same time, he dealt with a high ankle sprain for the majority of the beginning of the season, and that really set him into a slippery slope the back half of the year. So, you look at the rest of this team, and I think that if they're able to go 5-6, 6-5 leading into that stretch, I think that Watson's going to be able to, really take advantage because you look at some of these teams and some of these defenses, and yes, you have the Cincinnati Bengals who played well last year, but again, we're not sure how the negotiations are going with Jesse Bates. And so, you look at a lot of these different teams, and I think that Deshaun Watson can take advantage of some of these teams on offense, but it just comes down to how long does it take for these guys to click.
And as you saw there, 4 road games in the final 6 for the Browns, 2 at home, 3 against the division. Now, presumably, when Deshaun Watson takes that first snap against Houston, week number 13, on Sunday, December 4th, it will be his first action in an NFL game in 23 months, nearly 2 years, because the last time, Mac, we saw Deshaun Watson on the field was in 2020 as a member of the Houston Texans. You mentioned what you think he might be able to do for the Browns in those final 6 games. What is your level of expectation when you see Deshaun Watson on the field in a Browns uniform?
I think that when it comes to Deshaun Watson, it's going to take some time. There's going to be rust. You mentioned it. He hasn't played an NFL game in almost 2 years. So there's naturally going to be some rust. And on top of that, you're also dealing with a new situation where you're dealing with new teammates. So I think that they're going to take him along slowly, I think, to start, mainly leaning on Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt. Obviously, they have some talented young running backs in Dearness Johnson and Jerome Ford. So they're going to lean on that running game a bit. But I do think that Deshaun Watson, you're going to see those flashes early on. And I think that as the season kind of goes on, you're going to see them slowly open up that playbook a little bit, little by little, mainly because of the fact that, again, he still has that natural arm talent. And even being in Berea for minicamp, getting a chance to see him on the field, I saw him throwing around with some of those players, and I saw what he was able to do with that arm talent. And I thought this is by far the best that I've ever seen, period, when it comes to a Browns quarterback. And understanding what he's able to do on the field, I was like, you know what? I know what we've been missing. I know what we've been missing. And so, in getting a chance to see that, I do think that there's going to be a bit of an adjustment period because of that rust. But at the same time, I do think that we're going to see some of the plays that made Deshaun Watson in 2020.
Mac, we have focused so much on the quarterback position for the Cleveland Browns, not only Deshaun Watson, but what Jacoby Brissett will be able to do as the QB in Cleveland as well. But as you have pointed out to us when you've appeared on TMA in the past, the roster is loaded. You look at the depth chart, both offensively and certainly on the defensive side of the football, Cleveland should have optimism outside of the uncertainty around the quarterback position. And when you look at Myles Garrett, namely the favorite to win Defensive Player of the Year here in the preseason leading into 2022 in the NFL, a season-long sack prop at 13.5. Mac, my question to you is this: how good does the defense, Myles Garrett, the rest of the roster have to be to make sure that Cleveland can be in the hunt for a postseason spot this year?
I think they have to play similar to what we saw last year in the back half of the season. And that was, Myles Garrett played very well, but at the same time, you also saw some of the best play out of Jadeveon Clowney as well on the opposite side. And on top of that, you look in that secondary. Obviously, Denzel Ward, another $100 million man on that defense now, and you mix in John Johnson, who is one of the crown jewels for that free agency in 2021. So, there's a lot of talent on this team, but the underrated part of this is the fact that, for the first time since Joe Woods got to Cleveland in 2020, he's actually returning the majority of his starters. Going into last year, they only had 2, maybe 3 returning starters for the starting lineup heading into 2021. So now you have the majority of those guys that are, understanding what their expectations are, and Joe Woods understanding what their skill sets are to be able to properly utilize them. And that's what you saw in the back half of the season. That's why, again, in Green Bay, in Lambeau, Browns were still able to almost pull out that win despite Baker Mayfield throwing 4 interceptions. So, this defense was able to lock down Lamar Jackson in back-to-back weeks. And so I think that this is a defense that needs to step up, but I also think that they're talented enough on the defensive side to be able to do that and then some in Watson's while Watson misses time.
So, Mac, if the Cleveland Browns can stay afloat, and by mid-late December, early January, they are on those in-the-hunt graphics. As we look at the AFC Championship odds, a postseason market, Cleveland is 21-1, tied for the 10th best price in the AFC right now. What is the Browns' ceiling for 2022 in your mind?
For 2022, I would say this. I think that, they can get a playoff berth, and I think that they can win a couple of games. I just really think it's so much uncertainty when it comes to how long it takes Watson to adjust when he comes back, when it comes to how long it takes him to adjust with those weapons around him. And there's so many questions that, personally as a Browns fan, and you know what, I like throwing a little bit of money away at this point. I might throw down a few bucks on that prop at that point, because the range of outcomes when it comes to the Browns is so wide because of that. And so being able to see where they're at when it comes to, possibly missing the postseason if they're not able to stay afloat, but if they are, I do think that this roster, like you mentioned, they're loaded enough to where they can make that run. And at the same time, when you have that quarterback in Deshaun Watson, I think that they can do it.
Mac Robinson, great perspective for the Browns looking forward in 2022. More TMA up next.
Sports Grid, your 24/7 sports wagering network.
People are going to the betting window
Betting
and
above
betting
the
them now
rim.
before the trade takes place.
How
Diamond
dare they
bets.
do what's fiscally responsible? See how it plays out. Buffalo's going all in right
Football
now. They
full
need
circle.
all their chips in the middle of the table. It's do or die for them.
And Godwin being out, they've had a little bit of a shakeup.
In-game live all access.
You could take the points, you could take the money line, and
We had to go to San Jose too. Maybe a small play on San Jose. I'm gonna go both underdogs here. I don't want to hear it anymore.
Wow. In-game
Phillies
live.
here,
Prime
over minus
time.
128. You do have to lay up a little bit of wood here, Donnie, but I think against Patrick Corbin.
But boy, you want to give me 8.5 points with a desperate team facing
Get
elimination.
the winning edge. Only on Sports Grid, your 24/7 sports wagering network. The morning after.
Chargers a playoff team in 2022.
Our concern, our chief concern right now, no pun intended, is that the Chargers have had a habit of blowing games late, and it continued with the new coaching regime. I do think they are one of the teams that I can pencil in. I wouldn't put them in pen, but I'd pencil them in.
The Sports Grid Network. The Bostonian versus the Book.
The next two Super Bowls for us are going to be ridiculous.
yeah,
Like, just ridiculous. So I cannot wait to see what's going to happen in Arizona.
really hope it's not the Patriots.
Oh, could you imagine that?
No.
Mac Jones in the Super Bowl
Stop.
in year 2? Oh, man.
Stop talking.
The Bostonian versus the Book. Pharrell coast to coast.
Is it that much better than the Phillies?
I mean, I would say that probably as a staff, as a whole, the Braves staff is probably not as good as 1 and 2 of Philly, but I think from 3 on down, I do think Atlanta's better. And remember, some of those starting pitchers that are not going to start for the Braves are going to be coming out of the bullpen in a series like that in the wild card. So,
The Sports Grid Network.
Rounding out hour number one this Friday live right here on the Morning After on Sports Grid and Sirius XM Channel 159. The home for Sports Grid Radio on Sirius XM, all across the Sports Grid network. I am Ben Stevens. Deshaun Watson will now miss 11 games for the Cleveland Browns in 2022. There is some finality, some clarity to Watson's suspension for this upcoming year in the NFL. And the market has moved. The Browns win total shaded heavily toward the under of 8.5 at minus 160, that being the juice. But that's the only area you can fade the Cleveland Browns theoretically for the 2022 regular season. We discuss that now in Fade the Public. Because on the FanDuel Sportsbook, the Cleveland Browns have a make playoff number. It's even money plus 100, and that price hasn't moved. Because unlike the 31 other NFL organizations, there is no miss playoff number for the Browns this year. So we did that work in Fade the Public. Will the Cleveland Browns make the playoffs in 2022? Simply yes or no. And as you can see, most of the public, nearly 95% of the public, now moving down to 90.5 in this updated look that I am getting here. The public saying 90% the Cleveland Browns will miss the postseason in 2022. This is an area you could fade Cleveland in the regular season. That option is not available on the FanDuel Sportsbook right now, and we have seen the public come in to fade the Browns on that win total. One final point on this 11-game suspension for Deshaun Watson in 2022. We heard numerous times Commissioner Roger Goodell adamant that the NFL was seeking a full year-long suspension. They failed to do that. They settled for 11 games. And you might say this was the time for the National Football League to finally make a stand, having fumbled so many disciplinary processes in the past for its personal conduct policy. This was their time to make a statement. They did not do that yesterday, feeling it was in the best interest of both the league and the Players Association to just move forward for the 2022 campaign. Hour number 2 of the Morning After is up next.